Hey, welcome, fellow human beings, to the podcast Addiction, Abuse, Recovery by Matt Logan Speaks. I am Matt Logan. However, I'm not going to be your host. Our host for this podcast is Sherry Irvin, who has personal, unfortunate experience with addiction and abuse, but she has been in recovery for more than 8 years now. Part of Matt Logan Speaks, we want to just share other people's stories in the hopes that it will help you through your day, that it's just another tool in your toolbox to get you through the day. So please help me welcome your host, Sherry Irvin.
Hi everyone, welcome to Addiction, Abuse, and Recovery. With me today I have special guest Tim Volz, who is the treatment director at Recovery's Happening. Tim is a master's in social work?
No, it's a master's in addiction, mental health counseling.
All right. And you have had over 8 years of counseling with inpatient and outpatient?
Yeah, it's actually closer to 10, counting the internship. Okay. And I also worked at Cronin Home while I was going back to school. So I like to utilize that as well. So, I mean, it actually goes back to about 2009 that I've been working with folks struggling with substance use disorders.
And then I read somewhere too that you actually kind of specialize more with the opioid?
I did. Okay. Yes. Back in 2012 to probably 14, I worked with a lot of folks with opioid use disorders. Now I've kind of, they're included in the program, the long-term program, but it's basically now methamphetamine is on the rise. So you just have to kind of go with what the population is and who's struggling. And, I mean, there's always these peaks and valleys and ups and downs of different drugs of choice that become, prevalent in the community. And right now it's methamphetamine. It's always been alcohol, and opioids are still around, obviously. So you just kind of take the clients that come in that are willing to put in the work in a long-term program. So it started with opioids. The longer-term program kind of was based off drug court and opioids, but now it's branched into a lot of just people that are internally motivated and want to do a long-term program, because it's not for everyone. So yeah, you live and you learn and you grow and you expand and you alter and change your curriculum. It's kind of it flows up and down. So yeah, I'm working with whoever really wants the help and is really motivated to do a long-term program with a lot of peaks and valleys and struggling through a lot of those things, because at the end of the program, they've usually got a lot of things back, and they have a pretty solid foundation. Gives them a fighting chance.
I think what impressed me the most, and we have talked about this in the past, is where your treatment is so completely different than all the other treatment in town here. You have a longer run. You're teaching people skills, because a lot of them don't even know how to do something as simple as, the success rate, your recidivism is just low. I mean,
if people get to the end of it, the recidivism seems to be a lot lower. But retention and treatment is evidence-based practices says retention and treatment gives you a 15% chance, a better chance of sustaining your recovery than doing the more traditional. So that's part of the reason I do it. But yeah, I'm a teacher by trade, so I look at it as I'm a facilitator and an educator. So we do talk a lot about, balancing a budget and, having a shopping budget, grocery shopping, and things that a lot of people take for granted that these folks know how to do, and they have no clue. The length of it kind of separates it from other programs. But there are programs that run a little bit longer, but this one is kind of, I just had a guy that completed that had 31 months with me. So that's two and a half going on. Well, yeah, that's a little over 2.5 years. It's just everybody is individual. And then eventually you have to kind of find footing out in the community. So, it's kind of like eventually you kind of have to push them out the door and say, listen, you have to build all of these things out there. You have to build your structure out there so you don't become, reliant on treatment. Because most of the folks that come in have been to, minimum of 7 treatments and up to 15 or 20. So you have to give them something different. You can't just keep throwing them in the same program that gives you the same skills. So try to work outside the box. really focus a lot on holistic health and a lot of nutrition and a lot of, sleep habits and a lot of daily structure and balance and boundaries. And I mean, a lot of things overlap in the traditional programs, but we spend more time on them in the long term. Like we'll go back to boundaries probably 7 to 10 times and utilize a whole week on people, places, and things, and boundaries. So it's difficult to operate a long-term program because, it's people start to hit the wall after a period of time, and that's usually when they start to get thirsty or want to go back, and to be able to pull them back in and get them, adding things as they go so they don't get stagnant, I think is a huge part. And if you can start adding pieces, they have at the end of the day, if somebody does slip after being in a long-term program, they come back quicker. And I think that's you're ultimately a seed planter. And, if they've taken a lot of that in and do have a slip or a lapse, or they come back quicker. And I think that's the key right there. Because staying completely abstinent, people do it all the time, but the treatment statistics show that it's the numbers aren't very encouraging.
Yeah. I know that, especially with everything going on, you have done, you've kept your doors open, and there's been a real need for, with the COVID thing going on. I mean, has that been difficult for you to make that adjustment? And I know that you've kind of had to make everything safe. And
well, there was a lot to it, but you have to come up with a plan, and you have to come up with a quick plan. And what are you going to do? The telehealth is something that a lot of places have decided to go with. I decided that I was going to break my group into 2 groups, into smaller groups, so we can stay in compliance with the CDC guidelines and now the governor's guidelines of no groups of 10 or more. So you want to keep the group numbers down, but at the same time, I just felt like, if I had cancer and or I had a medical problem that was serious, I would not be denied care. So with the disease of addiction, I think that the connection and the face-to-face is so important. And a lot of that's been taken away. I mean, AA clubs are slowly starting to open back up again. Smart Recovery, Celebrate Recovery, church, gyms are still closed. So if you take everything away and then you give them a stimulus check, and then you give them more money to stay at home than they would to get to work, how many people have the ability to set money aside to pay their bills? And I mean, it's when you're in early recovery, your brain's not working real well, and you're very impulsive. So a lot of times what people will do is free money, they'll think, and what can I do with this? Well, I can get away with it now because I don't have the accountability of urine screens. I don't have probation operating at 100% capacity where they're doing face-to-face if I am on probation. Child protection services are still operating, but again, it's more remote. So I can get away with it. And if people can get away with it and they're not in programming, chances are a lot of them are. And I didn't want that to happen. I mean, I'm invested in the folks that I work with. It's, you're with me for 12 to 18 months, some of them longer than that. I didn't want to take away that piece. So we adapted and, put the stringent guidelines in place. The doors are locked during the day. The community recovery organization's closed. It's by appointment only. It's a skeleton crew working in there right now. A lot of people, recovery coaches, are working remotely in the community. So it's just the 3 treatment providers and a receptionist, and people have been so great donating masks, making masks and donating them. We have the infrared thermometers. If people have any kind of a scratch in their throat or whatever, I tell them to stay home. Plenty of people in the program, I believe 8 in my group, have had family members or people at work that have tested positive, and they've went and gotten tested, and every one of them came back negative. So knock on wood, it's worked so far, and I think people really, the client base, really appreciate the fact that they can still meet, talk about their issues, get the UA accountability, the witnessed urine screens, and it's just been difficult, but in the end, my value system said stay open. I checked in with a lot of other professionals in the community, and they kind of said, Tim, each treatment provider, each treatment director is doing what they think is right. If your value system says stay open and you've put all the guidelines in place, there's no reason why it shouldn't be. And so I kind of went with it, and so far it's been very positive. I've been able to keep people clean, and
Huge.
I haven't been able to. They've been able to, but they've been able to utilize the group setting to help the process, which is, that's what we're looking for, is people to change their lives. And this would have been a very easy opportunity for people to use this as a justification or rationalization or excuse to go back out there, and many have. Many people, it's a struggle out there with mental health and addiction, and they're having interviews with people on the news, and they're talking about how people don't know how they're gonna live and how they're gonna do this, and when that stress accumulates, with the combination of post-acute withdrawal and then stress exacerbates that, using becomes in their mind the only option. And if you take away everything, you're left with a lot of suicidality and suicidal ideation, and I just wasn't going to deal with that nightmare. Not with the folks I work with.
Well, and then not only that, too, what's been so great, and like I said, we've talked about this before, and I've talked with a lot of other people, is that you have a high accountability, and you say things exactly what, you're one of those that tells them exactly what they need to hear, not what they want to hear. You hold the bar higher. It's how bad you want your sobriety, how bad you want, actually, you're tough, and I've talked to people, and even though they say you're tough, at the same time, they still appreciate that about you, because there's that sense of routine. And and I've talked to a few of them that are in your group, and they love that. Because, even though, they get a little bit butthurt because you are so tough on them, at the same time, they appreciate that because you're holding them to their stand, to your standard, how bad you want your sobriety, how bad you want the help.
It's tough love, It's just, it really comes down to, if you're willing, most people underestimate their addiction. Most people underestimate the accountability of a long-term program until they get into it. So what I find is you get an opportunity, and then what you do with that opportunity is on you. I give them several chances. I don't kick people out for slips right off the bat. We work with it. I'm expecting them to happen, especially when they taper down, drop from 3 nights to 2 nights to 1. I'm expecting a struggle, and a lot of times it happens. But what I find is people weed themselves out. I always tell them, you'll be the one that walks away from me. I won't be the one that walks away from you. And that is kind of basically the way therapists do a lot of their mental health. You will be the one that walks away. It won't be me. And that's what I've seen. It's not for everyone, but we refer people to more traditional programs all the time. Or there's times where somebody will come in and I feel like they've reached their therapeutic peak at 4 or 5 months, and we'll just give them a successful discharge. They just don't get the big coin, they get the small coin. So it's you just take each person individually and you find what works with them. A lot of this is putting a puzzle together. So the pieces, the one size fits all box doesn't work for everybody, obviously. Put everybody in a box and maybe 5% make it. So you have to find what works with them and then adapt the treatment plan and everything else to their interests and what is working for them. I can't force feed somebody to go to a 12-step meeting if that's not what they're into. I encourage them to try them, but maybe they're more along the lines of a smart recovery option, or maybe they're more along the lines of physical fitness and yoga. And you just have to keep putting pieces together until you find a puzzle that fits to some extent. And that takes time. You can't do that in 3 months. You can't do it in 4, 5, 6. Sometimes you can't do it in 18, but you have a better chance of getting them on solid ground and getting them that foundation they need, the pillar. They gotta find their own pillar, and then we can help, by offering suggestions. With peer recovery coaches play a big piece in this. Sober housing plays a big piece in this. Mental health obviously plays a huge piece in it. And we have to put all those pieces together. And it takes time to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I know that, looking at, my question to you was, are you seeing more of a rise on the younger crowd with more addiction things coming in, or the older adults? Because a lot of the things that I'm seeing, like for suicide, for overdoses and stuff, I'm seeing more of our younger.
Yeah.
And is that mostly because of the methamphetamine or the alcoholism
That's a good question. I think more people may be seeking help at this point in time. I think it's less, there's less stigma out there. So maybe young people are more inclined to seek help. There's more resources out there that are available. I mean, I worked with adolescents for 3 years in an inpatient and outpatient treatment facility in Mankato area. And what I found about working with that population is you're a seed planter. And once they get into programming, if you can plant some seeds, they might not take right away, but they could take down the road. I just think there's more accessibility to drugs today. I think the culture is, obviously changed, and young people are experimenting with things more. It's just, this is, addiction is from 6 years. I've seen people that have started using up at 6 years old, and I've had people in treatment in their 70s, So I just think that it's prevalent worldwide. And there's a lot of young people in treatment. There's a lot of young people on probation. I don't think if you're on probation necessarily you're going to seek help though when you're really young, unless the family is pushing the person to get into treatment. Again, a lot of it comes down to family when you're young, when you're an adolescent into your early 20s. Are you enabling? Are you denying there's a problem? Or are you putting your foot down, having some boundaries, and having this young person go and get some initial help?
Are you seeing more of a rise though in the alcohol part, or more in the drugs itself?
I think it's
or
alcohol.
Equal.
I think alcohol's always been there. I think it's pretty much right now. I've got about 50-50.
You do
in the two groups. Yeah, it's around 50-50. Methamphetamine appears to be the drug that is just leaps and bounds become a huge problem, and cocaine's back on the rise again. Crack cocaine's back on the rise to some extent. Heroin's always been there. That's never went away. I think some people thought it was going to go away and there was going to be something to take its place, and I think that that's still in there. And then you've got, alcohol, you've got a little bit of benzo. The marijuana has been, people have eased, some providers and probation department has eased up on the marijuana piece a little bit. And now you can get medical marijuana relatively easy, which used to be, a lot of facilities used to say abstinence. They didn't want anybody using marijuana. And I'm not going to get into that right now, but that seems to be a lesser of the evils right now is the marijuana smoking. It's becoming more, socially acceptable outside of treatment.
Well, and I think what makes it even harder too, obviously prohibition didn't work, but when you got the one drug that's very, very illegal, and then you've got alcohol that's legal, and and it's so easy for kids to access it now too, like it always has been. Find somebody that's old enough to buy for you, or
right.
Whatever. But I was just kind of curious if, because I've been reading in the paper and then within the recovery community itself that, there are more younger people dying lately.
Yeah.
There have been quite a few that I've been in the paper, and,
yeah.
And it's sad seeing the celebration of life, things going out of, of a 16-year-old. And
it's difficult. It's hard.
I was just kind of wondering if you're seeing more of the younger crowd in the treatment versus, the older.
No, I'm not. But we don't work with adolescents a lot either. So, and there's, one part is that there's very few adolescent programs. It's a very, very tough population to work with. I worked in Winnebago at the Adolescent Treatment Center, and that because of COVID is closed now. Whether that's temporary or permanent, I'm not for sure, but they've closed down. And Fountain Center's inpatient in Albert Lee's adolescent program was running really strong when I was in Winnebago, and I don't believe that is still closed down. So when you take away the facilities, and it's the reason why is a tough population to work with. Adolescents are tough. It's and a lot of it's because it's not as much the adolescent, it's the parenting and the enabling and the addiction, and the whole entire family makes it really difficult to have a kid come in for 60 to 90 days like we had them, knowing they're going to go back home to that same environment and nothing's going to change in the environment. The kids changed a little bit, but you put them back in that environment, and what's going to happen? It's going to be right back to the races. And that was kind of heartbreaking to watch, so it's a tough population to work with. And I think that's part of the reason why there's been more people out there using without getting any help is where do they go?
Where do they go?
Yeah.
And I think what makes you such an asset to your, to what you're doing is that you are also a man in long-term recovery, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's that's a big piece when you've lived it. I mean, I just had celebrated 13 years on Monday, 25th. So Memorial Day weekend is kind of a
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's a reflective, it's time to reminisce a little bit about what it was like. And, I mean, I find that, counselors need to really work a strong program of recovery. They have to separate, but they also have to work a very strong program of recovery, because I think a lot of people, I've seen this, they set goals when they get sober and they become counselors, and a lot of them start to neglect their own recovery program, and a lot of times it ends pretty disastrously. So I have to work a strong recovery program and continue to work with a sponsor and continue to attend a home group meeting and do all of the things that I did when I was 1 and 2 years clean, just maybe not as at an extreme level as I did in my first 2 years of recovery, where I was going to a meeting every day for the first 18 months and working the steps, and then getting another sponsor and working the steps, and just, throwing myself into it, which is what I had to do, is throw myself into it. And then I've been, in school. I was a teacher.
Yes.
And that was taken away, rightfully so, after a felony DUI in 2004. And then the road to redemption per se started with going back to school to get my graduate LADC certificate, and then from there going on and getting my master's degree through Walden University, and now doing the mental health supervision to get my LPCC. So it's been a lot of education and learning that way as well. So when you can put the two together, experience with incarceration and all of that, and then experience in a lot of, I worked at Blue Stem and did my whole entire internship and my supervision at Blue Stem, which is strictly a mental health facility that works with kids, adolescents, and adults. It's been an absolutely amazing, positive, great experience to get outside of my comfort zone, which is an addiction, and go through the mental health piece where, you're going through the diagnosis and you're doing diagnostic assessments, and being able to, eventually get that dual license is going to open up more doors.
Yeah.
I think it's just a lot of staying humble and continuing to be teachable and wanting to learn. The longer I get in recovery, the more I realize I have to learn, a lot more to learn. So, yes, it's been beneficial being in recovery. I wouldn't be doing this if I wasn't in recovery. I didn't grow up wanting to be a counselor. I grew up wanting to be a teacher and a coach. Yeah. Basically, I am a teacher and a coach at this point.
are.
It's just in a different setting. Yeah. So.
Where do you see yourself going? I mean, are you making big changes for recovery's happening? Are you planning on moving forward? And
that's a good question. And I believe in staying small. I believe, quality over quantity. I've always wanted to stay small, and I don't want to have 7 counselors, and I don't want to, continue to grow and have a whole city block of things going on. What I want to do is stay small and focus on my curriculum, the long-term program, and then as you know, I'm taking the test, the LPCC test, coming up here in a few months, and then I finish my supervision early 2021, and then when that's over, seeing how things are in the world with COVID and everything else, then don't know. Adding an enhancement and getting the mental health licensure at recoveries happening is something we've talked about doing, and being able to provide that service as well. One-stop shops are good in some instances, and in a way, sometimes it's good to get your meat and potatoes, your group therapy in one place, and being able to go somewhere else and get your mental health therapy. I think that's a positive too, because you're collaborating with a lot of professionals in the community, and different pieces. So I don't know. I mean, I've always wanted to teach. Teaching at the college level has always been something that I wanted to do. I think that there's I'm very, very much in need to teach these young people that decide they want to be counselors, to give them the tools. And I've taken in 17 interns in the 10 years that I've been in LADC, and when you take in an intern, it's your responsibility to give them the skills and the tools. And coming from a teaching background, I take it very, very seriously. I'm actually shocked sometimes at when you get these people that come in for interviews, and you get them and they come in and they sit down and they start working, and you realize how much they don't know. And so I think there's a real need for better instruction at the college level, and better internship capability. And then, dealing with the mental health as a male therapist, I think that they're very much in need. And someone that can, with an addiction background, that can work with somebody with substance use disorders that have a co-occurring, which is most of them, a co-occurring disorder, males that have something that they're uncomfortable talking about because of the stigma of being male, and we take care of our own business, and we're not going to be sharing any feelings. And I think there's something to be said for being vulnerable. And I think if you can work with a population and get them to be vulnerable, I think what happens is their lives open up in all kinds of wonderful ways. So it's nice to have options. I can tell you that working in the addiction field is not something that is my intention to do for the rest of my life. It takes a lot out of you. It's a high burnout profession. I look around, I've been doing this 10 years, and I look around the community, and I don't see very many people still doing it since I've been doing it. And so, and 10 years you wouldn't think 10 years is like a long career, but in this, it's, somebody told me, a long time ago that every year that you work with adolescents is considered to be 2. And I disagreed with them, and I thought it should be 3. Because I just think takes this field just takes a lot out of you. It's not a you don't punch in, punch out. It's I'm a regular 60-hour a week guy. I'm there every day, even
I
if
know
it's
you
for just a
work
little
lot
bit.
of hours,
And you have to be passionate and dedicated to do this if you want to do it the right way. And that's what I found out. The paperwork alone takes 20 to 25 hours a week to do. And then that leaves you what? If you're working a 40-hour week, 15 hours, you're doing 3 groups, that's 9 hours, every once in a while you have to go use the bathroom. It doesn't leave you a lot of time, Sherry. No. So, you have to, expand on that. And I end up doing a lot of my paperwork on Saturdays and Sundays. And I know many counselors do that. Yeah. I worked in a place where, maybe I got my habits from a particular couple working at a place they were workaholics. That was the way they did things. They had to do it that way. It was a small facility, and they were there every single day. And I told myself, I don't want to be like that. And here I am.
Here you are.
8 years later, and I understand why. If you want to run a successful business, you have to put in the time. And which means other things have to go under that. And with a high burnout level and a lot of people in recovery and in being a counselor, there's a reason that there's a high turnover and a high burnout level. It's because it's really hard to focus on your recovery and take on a job with high stress, high responsibility, low reward. It can be brutal.
The self-care is missing too.
Self-care is
absolutely missing.
Yep.
I know that you had shared with me in the past too that you're, starting to write a book.
Yeah.
And I know that I hope that you're able to finish that. But like you said, I know the hours that you put in. We've discussed it too, and you're there Saturday. You allow yourself enough time on Sunday to work out. But it's always, you're always kind of working.
Yeah.
So
you have to, it comes down to this. You have to sacrifice meaningful parts of your life to do this the right way. Mm-hmm. It's that simple. And fortunately or unfortunately, depending on who you talk to, that's been the case with me. And I can't pour from an empty cup. So I need to take the time for self-care, and I need to go to meetings, and I need to work out, and I need to play golf, and I need to find time to get in the things that I need to do to recharge. And without being able to do that, what you do is you turn into what I refer to as a dry drunk, angry, bitter, resentful,
Yes.
and I don't want to get that way. And in order for me to stay healthy, I have to take care of my health. And I have to take care of myself.
Yes.
And that's part of balance, and that's part of growth, and that's part of learning, and that's part of that stuff can wait till Monday, But you got to look at it like this: walking out the door, and you have somebody that comes in the door in crisis, and they need something. It might be 10 minutes, it might be a half an hour. What do you tell them? Do you tell them, "I'm sorry, but I just punched out, and I am going home, you can come back tomorrow"? Or do you take the time to meet with them and give that client a little bit of help that might push them through? What do? You ask 1,000 people that are counselors what they would do and what they actually do and what they should do, and I have seen it. Come back tomorrow. I can't do that.
No.
I'm just not built
That's
like
not
that.
you. No.
So I think that's what separates the people that stay and the people that build a decent reputation in the community, and the people that are in it for, I hate to say it because there's no money in the field, but the people that are in it for a paycheck. Mm-hmm. And I can't, very well tell somebody to come back in the morning if they're in crisis. You have to take the time with them. And that's part of the passion.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming. I so appreciate this because I know how busy you are, and I know all the good that you've been doing, and, and I hear it. And like I said, I see it in the numbers. Your program has just been, the success has been really good. I mean, I hear a lot of, of how much you've helped them just on the basic stuff, even the basic stuff. And it's just, that you're helping people so that they have a new way of life. And I know that passion that you have I've heard where you've, taken that extra mile with them when you could have just as easily gone home. I've seen it, firsthand. Okay, I got a few minutes, so I really appreciate what you've done for the community, and I love the fact that your treatment program is so much different. You're offering those life skills where some of the other ones aren't so much, and so I appreciate everything that you do, and thank you so much for taking the time to be here with me on this podcast. I really appreciate it.
No problem, Sherry.
Thanks for listening to today's podcast of Addiction Abuse Recovery, everyone. I hope that you enjoyed it. I'm sure you did, as I did. I want you to know that if you want to follow along, just go ahead and hit subscribe on YouTube and Spotify, iHeartRadio, Podbean, Apple Podcast. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. Just search out Matt Logan Speaks. We have all kinds of great content for you. Hit the notifications button so that when something new comes up, you're the first to know. Have a great day.